The presenting sponsor of the CANIE Climate Dialogues podcast is the University of Auckland's International Office, and we owe them a huge thank you for their support. The University of Auckland's International Office is proud to sponsor the CANIE Climate Dialogues podcast series, and we hope to continue to make them proud with this current season and upcoming episodes. As you can imagine, New Zealand is a unique place to think about climate through the lens of their Indigenous cultures, leading the world's universities in the Times Higher Ed Global Impact Rankings for the first 2 years of the rankings. As we all work towards the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the international team at the University of Auckland share your concerns, including your concern about climate action and international education. The University of Auckland is answering the world's call.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the CANIE Climate Dialogues. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kelly Davis, and I'm here today to introduce another co-host, Amy Marcus. Amy, thanks so much for joining us today. Where are you today joining us from?
I am physically in Walnut Creek, California.
Wonderful. So Amy is 9 hours behind me. I am in Oslo in Norway, and she's featuring a background on her Zoom screen that looks a little bit like Norway. It's got some snowy trees in the background. It looks really nice. I actually wish it still looked like that here, but it's been raining the last few days, so all the snow is melting. Yeah, it's not my favorite, but because then it freezes and then you're gonna potentially die every step you take. So that's fun. Anyway, Amy, thank you so much for joining us today. You are such a valuable member of CANIE, and you've been a part of the organization for a while now. So tell us how you heard about CANIE and how you participate.
Yeah, I was trying to remember how I heard about CANIE. I think it sort of popped up in a few different spaces over kind of 2019, 2020. And I think where I really finally looked deeper into it was while I was taking a course at my previous job at UC Berkeley Extension. I was taking a student affairs class at Extension and decided to do a project on creating a culture of sustainability on your campus, and was looking at ASHE and a bunch of other organizations, and ended up coming across CANIE and was like, wait, that's really cool. That's the type of thing I want to get involved in. And how I've been involved over the last year or so is I kind of jumped right in and agreed to be secretary of the Americas chapter right off the bat, which was so fun. So I did that the past year. And I think shortly after that, joined the climate justice working group, which has been amazing. And then maybe it was summer, fall, joined the podcast group, which has been super, super fun. But I kind of went all in. And so I, for that, and then for a few other things going on at home, I stepped down from the chapter secretary position, but still super involved in terms of the podcast and the climate justice group.
Absolutely. And I think that 2 working groups is enough, or even being secretary. Those things separately are in and of themselves a little part-time jobs. So thanks so much for all of the work that you've put in so far at CANIE. We want to know a little bit about you, since you're going to be hosting upcoming episodes, including the one that folks are currently listening to. So we'll start with the question that we ask all of our co-hosts as well as our guests, and that is, what is your climate story?
Yeah, you would think I'd have it more rehearsed by now. But I would say it really does go back to growing up in Hawaii, which is a place that is so connected to the natural environment and really sees the environment as part of your living experience. So that really kind of shaped a lot of my childhood and how I felt about the environment. But I was also raised by a bunch of New Yorkers who grew up in the city in Hawaii. So my family wasn't super involved. So it took a long time for me to find, I think, the confidence and identify sort of what my interest was and how I could take action. So it really wasn't until graduate school, honestly, when I had taken a few years to work between college and grad school, and then finally in grad school dove in a little more. So I went to the Middlebury Institute for their international education management and public administration programs, and managed to focus a lot of my coursework, a lot of my reading around sustainability topics like ecofeminism or service learning, focused on working with local communities around these challenges. and was able to sort of work in that for a little bit after grad school. I did my practicum with a really great organization called Authentica that does international service learning and related projects that are just super interdisciplinary and focused on the community and topics around cook stoves and water, clean water, those sorts of topics. And landed a full-time job at UC Berkeley Extension, which was great. And I was there about 2.5 years. But didn't manage to find other ways to get involved in climate. And so it wasn't until I left that I really found the energy and space to do that. So this past year or two, I dove in all in, kind of the way I did with CANIE, of just reading everything I could and listening to all the amazing podcasts. And I'd say the last year with that kind of experimentation, I've hosted an all weekend save circle, and I'm about to host another one through CANIE. Been facilitating climate change science workshops, kind of similar to Climate Fresh workshops at my current employer. Just sort of experimenting in all these different ways and finding what my niche is. It's been really, really an amazing experience to meet all these people who are in a similar space, right? Want to be involved, but trying to find their niche and find how they can help.
Absolutely. And it sounds like where kind of international education and your focus on climate action, your own climate action started intersecting might have been when you were at Middlebury and starting to do that research. Would you say that is where things started to intersect, or was it later? But tell us a little bit more about
I
that.
would say so. Yeah. I mean, a kind of catalyst moment I remember I was living in New York City right before grad school, trying to decide what to do next and knowing I wanted to go to grad school, but I wasn't sure quite for what. And at that time, I was still stuck in that thinking of, well, I'm not a scientist, so I can't actually dive into climate change, right? And I remember going to a talk at NYU around gender, and I think it intersected with climate change challenges. And I just was like, this is cool. These intersections of gender and climate and international development was really exciting to me. And so I ended up going to school for the pieces of that I felt I was more qualified for, I think is really what it was. So I did the international education and international development pieces, and then kind of peppered in the climate change pieces in grad school. Mm-hmm.
That's super cool. I'm trying to do something partially similar in my current studies. So I can admire what you're doing for sure. And do you want to tell the audience a little bit about what you're doing now? Because Amy is no longer in international education, but she's still participating through CANIE.
Yeah, I like to joke that if you like rolled back the definition of international education to be real broad, I'm kind of sort of still in international ed, but really not. No, I work at a company called HubSpot, which is a marketing, sales, and service software company based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I get to work remotely from California, which is great. And I am a senior program manager for accreditations under HubSpot Academy. So it is education related in that I'm under the branch that creates free education for customers and partners and just the community. And the accreditations piece is validating our partner agencies' skills in helping customers buy, onboard, implement HubSpot in their work. So there's a certain amount of education and validation and assessment. It's very international because we have partners and customers all over the world. So it's been a really interesting transition and really lovely, actually.
That's fantastic. Well, everyone, that is Amy Marcus, and she's going to take it away for the rest of the show, interviewing our guests. Amy, thanks so much for having this little introduction with us, and I think everyone is looking forward to listening to the episode.
Thanks so much, Kelly. Before we jump into the conversation, some quick housekeeping. I'd like to give the friendly reminder to subscribe to our podcast feed wherever it is that you lend your ears to the CANIE Climate Dialogue. And if you're one of our friends who listens on Apple Podcasts, let us know how you like the show with a friendly rating. We've also got lots of great recordings from our signature Climate Action Week and other events on our website at CANIE.org. We have two amazing interviewees for you all today, and I want to share a bit about their backgrounds. Dr. Suzanne Willever is a member of the CANIE Climate Justice Working Group and Associate Director for Academics and Outreach at Temple University's Education Abroad and Overseas Campuses Office. In that role, she oversees marketing communications, outreach, advising, and recruitment, supports academic initiatives and student learning, and leads her office's sustainability efforts. Dr. Willever earned her graduate degree in art history and believes that everyone can incorporate sustainability practices into their work. She hopes to bring her experience in teaching and learning, as well as marketing, to address this critical issue within international education. Her team has been collaborating with Temple's Office of Sustainability and recently launched Temple Global Green, an initiative to move toward carbon neutrality by addressing all aspects of their work. The office recently launched their inaugural Temple Global Green Grants to support student sustainability projects abroad and was selected as a finalist for the 2022 Forum on Education Abroad Award for advancing the UN Sustainable Development Goals through education abroad. Willever has presented nationally and internationally on addressing sustainability initiatives in international education, which have included a global CANIE climate justice webinar on offsetting in spring 2022, which I also co-presented with her, the Sustainability Lunch and Learn plenary panel at the Pennsylvania Council for International Education conference in October, and Sustainability and Education Abroad, Sharing Ideas, Taking Action at the NAFSA Region 8 conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania this November. Rebecca Collins is the Director of Sustainability at Temple University. In this position, Ms. Collins supports the advancement of sustainable academic initiatives and research, identifies opportunities to integrate sustainability into campus operations, and creates opportunities for outreach and engagement on sustainability issues for faculty, staff, and students. Prior to joining Temple University, Ms. Collins was the Corporate Initiatives Manager for Sustainability at the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority and a Sustainability Program Manager for Waste Management. A native of Bucks County and resident of Philadelphia, Ms. Collins holds a master's degree in Urban Environmental Systems Management from Pratt Institute, a bachelor's degree in communications from Syracuse University. Let's dive in. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Rebecca and Suzanne. I'm really, really excited to talk to you and hear all about your collaboration. We're going to dive right in, and I want to hear about your climate stories. Suzanne, would you like to share yours first?
Sure. So I will just sort of start from where I started working on this in education abroad. So I started seeing increasing research about the effects of climate change, and particularly the negative effects on communities with fewer resources, typically as a result of actions taken by wealthier societies, the global north on the global south. And I became extremely concerned about the priorities of international education and our role in addressing the climate crisis. So in our field, we believe in the value of study abroad for developing global citizens, future leaders who collaborate to solve shared challenges and advocate for social justice everywhere. But in order to do our jobs, we put students on airplanes. So I started questioning this, should we stop? We need to address this kind of elephant in the room. And I should note that climate change is not my field of expertise by any means. My academic training is in art history, and my professional background is in marketing, events, and education abroad. So, what business did I have addressing this problem? And what could I possibly do when everything seems so dire. But as I started working on sustainability initiatives, and especially as I partnered with others who were experts like Rebecca, I've learned that our goals are aligned with those of climate action. And there's really so much that we can do within our sphere of influence. And furthermore, that it's absolutely critical that we do that in international education.
I love that. I love that. So let's shift to the expert, if we will. Rebecca, I'd love to hear your climate story.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because there's similarities to Suzanne's story. So I actually didn't start out in the field of sustainability. When I went to college, I studied communications and business. And when I graduated, I moved to Los Angeles and worked in the television industry. And I was always really interested in sustainability, always had a love of nature, that sort of thing. But I didn't really connect that with a future profession. So I was out in Los Angeles working in the entertainment industry. And, at that time,
it's incredibly wasteful, right? It's energy intensive. You're on television sets with catering and, wardrobe and props and all of these things. And it would just make me so upset, and towards the end of my time, I just was kind of disillusioned by that industry. It wasn't my passion. And so I did a little soul searching. I figured out what was, and I was like, you know what? Like my passion is really figuring out this sustainability, climate action activism. So I quit my job. I moved to New York and I enrolled in a program at Pratt Institute, which focused on environmental systems, really focused on like an urban environment. And when I first started in this program, I was with people that were like engineers and architects and, like really, really brilliant, really smart individuals that had a lot more background knowledge. And here I am, this person from the television industry, right? But what I quickly realized was that while these individuals were brilliant, many of them didn't know how to tell the climate story. So taking that information that's extremely technical and breaking it down and getting people interested and involved and relating it to, you don't have to be an expert. Like you just have to have an interest. And that was really like a turning point for me in my kind of climate journey. After graduating, I worked for a number of organizations focused on sustainability. And I joined Temple University's team as the director of sustainability in 2019. So it's, that's just a perfect example of like, you don't have to be an expert. You just have to have an interest. And like, everybody has a place in this fight.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. I think I've heard similar stories from a lot of people, right? And I had that too of, well, who am I to come in and work on this? I don't know what I'm doing, but it really just takes that interest and that passion. Love that. So you had just started pretty much, I guess, a year before Suzanne reached out to you, Rebecca. So Suzanne, I want to ask, what prompted you to reach out to Temple's Office of Sustainability back in, I believe, April 2020, and what happened next?
Yeah. So, and Rebecca, I don't think I realized that you were that new to the role, but I learn more about you every time we talk. So when I first started looking into sustainability and international ed, and this is probably almost 5 years ago at this point, but it was more of a side project for me that I could work on as I had time. I was working with a student worker, trying to figure out what our carbon emissions looked like for student flights. And it was really slow going and hard to prioritize. And it wasn't until I asked others in my office to form a sustainability committee and reached out to the Office of Sustainability that we really started to make progress. So this was in about April of 2020. And I suppose it was kind of a silver lining of COVID that we had a bit more time to focus on sustainability. And really the crisis of the pandemic necessitated that we start doing that. So I reached out to the Office of Sustainability. And I was really just hoping they would provide us with some guidance for approaching, how do we calculate carbon emissions? What can we start doing? And I got so much more than I was hoping for. Rebecca got right back to me and she joined our Office's Sustainability Committee and she meets with us every other week. So we've been working together now for over 2.5 years. And it has been such a wonderful collaboration, I think, for both of us. And I'm sure she'll talk more about some of the mutual benefits of that in a little bit too.
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca, what was your initial reaction to Suzanne reaching out?
So, it's just really wonderful to have partners who are like excited and are coming to you with specific problems that are like relevant to their department, their business unit, their thinking through, how does this relate to me? How can I get involved? How can I help identify solutions? Because the truth of the matter is, you know, most Office of Sustainability's, our scope of work is extremely broad. It is trying to mitigate carbon emissions from all different facets of the university. So, you know, that's energy systems, that's waste, but it's also travel, not just flights, but it's also commuting. So whenever you have the opportunity to work with someone that's excited, I mean, I'm sure that I am in great company with every other Office of Sustainability. We jump at that, right? We want to be a support. And also it helps with our long-term goals for the university, identifying those partners. So I feel like a lot of the times individuals may think like, I'm going to be bothering them. Do they have time? That sort of thing. But like the truth of the matter is that you're not bothering us because we want partners. That's the only way we're going to get stuff done. And most of the time we can figure out a way for us to both help you, support you with your goals and strategies, and also help ourselves kind of get to those things that we're tasked with achieving, those milestones. So, you know, I just want to say, if there is an Office of Sustainability, don't hesitate to reach out. You know, we most likely, your Office of Sustainability is probably understaffed, which I'm sure everybody feels that the pressure of that, but we're always willing to support and, you know, to identify these partners that want to talk to us is really amazing.
So it's a win-win, sounds like.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. So I want to hear more about what kind of projects you two have collaborated on in these past 2.5 years. Who wants to dive in on that?
Yeah, I can get us started. So we've been working to figure out our carbon emissions from student and staff flights. That's a big ongoing project. We've also started addressing sustainability practices in various areas of our work, operations and marketing. So Rebecca has advised us as we've tried to reduce our marketing materials, and her team has started auditing our events and office operations, which is wonderful. One of the first big projects that we did together was an event series we collaborated on for International Education Week in November of 2021, so just over a year ago. And we brought in faculty experts from Temple faculty experts in environment and climate change, and we charged them with giving us some hope in the midst of a climate crisis, which was a challenge, but they did a great job. And then we brought in student panelists who were either abroad at the time or had recently been abroad, and they spoke about what they learned from study abroad about sustainable living practices in other countries. So they were talking about public transportation systems, energy efficiency, recycling programs, and these two events were the most well-attended events of that week. And then since then, we've had students, some of them from that panel, blogging about sustainability. We now have a whole topic on this on our website. We've built a host of resources on our website for students and for our broader community to help them understand the impacts of climate change on their host countries, how they can travel and live more sustainably abroad. And then we recently, this fall, launched our first Global Green Grants, which support students who want to implement sustainability projects abroad. Last spring, we hosted a composting event back here for students on main campus with the Office of Sustainability, led by the Office of Sustainability. And then we also participated in their residence hall clean out with our staff as part of our staff retreat. And we learned so much as part of that, and it really helped with our staff buy-in on those efforts. And I want to let Rebecca explain what that program is all about, because it's really a great example of full circle economy.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Suzanne. Yeah, so Give and Go Green is, we do it every single semester. The Office of Sustainability partners with Residential Life, and we collect clothing and non-perishable food items from students moving out of the residence halls. we sort all of that material. So one of the things that we do is we take all the non-perishable food items, and that's a direct donation to our Cherry Pantry, which is a food pantry on campus that the students who have a need can go get food free of charge. And then the other waste stream that we're trying to divert is textile waste, so clothing. And again, silver lining of the pandemic, we were able to pilot a data collection system with Give and Go Green. I was really interested in understanding, okay, you know, yes, it's impactful. We're collecting these clothings, but you know, what are they made of? Where are they coming from? You know, are there certain brands? How much are we talking about here? We never had a really good idea of just the volume. So during our move out, the first year, we had a reduced number of students living in the residence halls, and we were able to perfect this system. And so when Suzanne, the next year, when Suzanne was looking for something for team building for her staff, or with, you know, with her department, I was like, hey, you want to sort these clothes? We can do this together. And it's a really great opportunity for the Office of Sustainability to talk about things like fast fashion, like textile waste challenges, and really get people to think like inward. Okay, like what does it matter? You know, who's making my clothes, where it's being made, what it's being made of. And so, you know, it was just a really great opportunity for us to have an audience with a group of individuals that may not have the type of literacy on this that, you know, other individuals have. I will say one thing that's really cool about the program is that the reason that we sort all of this material is then we sell it during a Temple thrift in the fall. So it is a circular economy within Temple University, and all of the proceeds from that sale are donated back to the Cherry Pantry.
Oh, I'm getting chills a little bit. I just love these examples, not so much outside of the box for sustainability efforts, but for an international ed office to think, normally we would think immediately about our flights and our students going abroad or international students coming here. But this is something on campus that you can get involved in that's not necessarily directly related to your work, right? Of sending students back and forth. And so I just love these specific examples because there's so many great projects we can be working on to help educate students to have an impact on our campuses. I love that.
Yeah, and so much of what we talk about in international education is how we prepare students to take that global thinking and think locally, and participating in this project both for our staff and for our students who often will go and volunteer for Temple Thrift or participate in other ways, requested from us the composting workshop. So, you know, those kinds of things are really important to our work more broadly.
Cool. So this all sounds happy-go-lucky. I wonder what sort of challenges you might have faced in the last couple of years and how you handled those. That sounded like a job interview question, but you know, what sort of challenges did you face, and how did that go? I'm sorry, I didn't have someone start. Yeah, Rebecca.
Yeah, no, I can start. So you know, one of the challenges for me, and it was true when Suzanne first approached me about, you know, figuring out the carbon impact of flights, is data. So it's really hard to get data. A lot of the times, there's different owners of data. So one of the things that was really great with working with Suzanne is that she had the data, right? And I could synthesize the data and put a number on that, right? So I think one of the things that's really important, again, in connection, is that, like, you know, if you are a department, a study abroad office, you know, just giving the data to the Office of Sustainability, they will happily do whatever carbon projection that you have, because we're doing that all the time anyway. So then it actually is, you're using this, you know, the same, you know, metric ton of carbon per flight mile, it's then everything kind of like lines up. So for me, the biggest challenge is always the data. And then also like having willing partners, right? Which wasn't a challenge with Suzanne, obviously, but that is something that we all only have so many hours in our week, right? And we have so many different priorities. So that's always a challenge. And I feel like that's not going to change anytime soon.
Suzanne, how about you?
Yeah, I was going to speak to the same, getting the student travel data, which can be complicated even within our system, just because students aren't all getting on the same flight to the same place. Sometimes, unfortunately, they're taking multi-leg flights, and that's something we're hoping to discourage moving forward, but it can be difficult to track that data accurately. Another challenge we've been working really hard to resolve is putting together an offsetting project that will be local and have a positive impact on the community around Temple, and then possibly expanding that to our overseas campus locations to do similar projects there. So we've been working really hard to find ways to move that forward. Rebecca's been tremendously helpful connecting us with the Energy Authority and solarization projects in Philadelphia, and these talks are ongoing. So I would just say for folks, don't give up, keep trying, because sometimes it just takes like talking to the right person or the timing to be right. So we're just going to keep pushing that project forward. The other challenge, of course, always is time. Being able to make the time to prioritize what we all feel so stretched so thin often with our resources. But I found it really important to ask, what can we stop doing? And that's a great question to ask for the sustainability of your work as well, because if you can choose to find something to eliminate that saves you time and financial resources, then you can reallocate those things. So for example, one of the first things we did was to eliminate our hefty brochures, these catalogs that have all of the course listings from abroad, which change, of course, every year on a lot of the courses. They take months of work and collaboration to create. They cost a lot of money and a lot of trees to produce. And they're usually outdated by the time they go to press. So, as the marketing person, it was hard for me to let go of this. But like many folks in education abroad, we've moved to these smaller, more evergreen postcards with QR codes driving folks to our website. It has been tremendously freeing. We're making better use of our time to make sure the website is up to date and looking great. And we're reallocating our resources, our financial resources, and our time resources. And the decision was good for the environment as well. So now I'm like, what else can we stop doing?
Wow, the word freeing really stands out to me there, because I think a lot of people are hesitant to get rid of that brochure because they're afraid they won't reach the students, or they're afraid it won't maybe represent programs appropriately because it doesn't have beautiful pictures or the extra detail. But to hear you say that it was freeing to switch to a little postcard with a QR code is really cool to hear, right? Because then you can just update the website, or if you email in, we can provide you the updated information, what have you, as opposed to this brochure that feels so important, but to your point, is often out of date before it even gets in someone's hand. So
yeah, totally. And also one other thing we're doing, when we do print postcards, we're using printers that only use FSC certified recycled paper and soy-based inks and things like that. So 2 decisions on that front that were honestly in the end pretty easy to make.
Gorgeous. I love that call out. Thanks. So Rebecca, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about how the Office of Sustainability can actually help Ed Abroad and ISSS offices measure their emissions, and then also help develop an international ed strategy that aligns with the university strategy. So it's sort of 2 prongs there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the Office of Sustainability will have the tools that you need to do that carbon calculation, which I think is the first really important step, is really having an understanding of like, what is your impact, your carbon impact. And again, we can do that fairly quickly if we have information from you. Now we may make some assumptions. So, we may use some average numbers, that sort of thing, but like they're based in reality, right? So it's not something that you should feel bad about. It's a jumping off point for you. So we can really help with that kind of calculation, that projection. And then once we have that information, we can strategize with you to say, okay, so like, what are your goals? Here's your impact. This is what it means. How can we work together to really figure out like how we're going to make all of these emissions go away, or at least reduce them over time. So it really is a partnership. We have information about, what our industry best practices. Maybe we have connections at other schools. We have data and information. So that's where we can be helpful. But ultimately, it's the decision of the individual offices that really takes that from just like a theoretical conversation to saying, no, okay, like this is important to us. We're going to go to our leadership. We're going to advocate for this. And we're going to support this, this path that we have decided, the strategy that we have decided for mitigating our emissions.
So it sounds like you're saying if I'm an Ed Abroad office, International Student Services office, I'm interested in taking action, but I don't really have any of these numbers. I'm not sure where to start. You're open to me coming to you and saying, help, where do I start? Even if I don't have numbers to work with.
Absolutely, because we can start asking you questions, and maybe you don't have all the answers, but for the questions that you can answer, that's a really easy jumping off point, right? So for instance, if I said to Suzanne, okay, Suzanne, like, during a semester, how much are you spending on printing? What are you printing? Where is that going? How much overage do you have? We can start there and brainstorming ideas. Okay, like what can be eliminated? How can we reduce our impact? That sort of thing. So, I think it's just, even just going to your Office of Sustainability and saying like, hey, listen, like this is important to us. We want to find things to identify some, short-term goals and develop a long-term strategy. We can help work through that.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think some offices might be afraid to reach out because they're not sure where to start, or we haven't done enough yet, or I like that invitation to just reach out and make that initial contact and get the conversation started. Let's see. So we know that sustainability offices are typically mandated to make operations more sustainable, right, across all sorts of different functions, as you mentioned earlier, Rebecca. You two, though, and your teams have clearly also prioritized student learning as well. Can you tell me more about how you've done that? Maybe Suzanne, do you want to start us off?
Definitely. So, student learning is at the core of what we do in higher education, right? So this aspect was really important to us. It's sort of central to our mission. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we built a host of resources on our website already, and we have plans to grow this. So far, it includes articles that demonstrate the impact of climate change on the host countries where our students travel the most. We have videos on reducing your carbon footprint while you travel, both getting there and while you're abroad, in ways that also enhance your study abroad experience. So, similar to what you may have heard of with Slow Travel with CANIE for professionals as well, we're trying to encourage students to take trains, for example, where they can, and how that can actually enhance the experience of travel itself. And we're planning to incorporate these kinds of materials into our pre-departure orientations as well. We're also working to launch a sustainability pledge for students that will, provide a list of the ways that they can live more sustainably, in the hopes that it will raise awareness and encourage buy-in. And we're also working with our colleagues at Penn State to launch Stay Local Abroad Weekends this spring. This was a great idea that they had that we really wanted to be a part of. So we're collaborating with our team at Temple Rome to get that going this semester. So lots of really exciting stuff with more to come.
Say more about that really quickly. Stay local abroad. So if you're studying abroad, don't do weekend trips, explore your local areas.
Yeah,
That's
we're
what you said?
identifying weekends where we can encourage students to stay local and explore their host country, which of course has wonderful benefits for sustainability, but also, again, that aspect of enhancing your study abroad experience, maybe exploring off the beaten path in your host city, learning about sustainably locally produced foods, walking, for those who are able to do so in the city, or taking public transportation. And then, we want there to be some like really fun aspects, exploring local culture and local food, and then perhaps also participating in a local cleanup. So we have a lot of ideas brewing, and it's still kind of a work in progress, but more to come on that in the spring.
Thanks for sharing that little sneak peek. I appreciate it. Rebecca, you also alluded to the student learning part earlier with I think the composting workshops and the thrifting and so on. Could you say more about the student learning aspect of your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, any institution of higher education that is reports through ASHE, which is the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. If you are submitting to STARS, which is basically our rating system for higher education, there are components of what we think about both the academic piece and the culture piece. So while, our climate action plan usually calls out, okay, we want to reduce emissions by this much, but by this time we're looking at our own, physical plant, our campuses, there's a huge part of our work that really focuses on that learning piece or on that culture piece, because we know that if we're ever going to have a chance of really making headway on, reducing the worst impacts from climate change, we need everybody thinking about this. So not just students who are interested in sustainability, but we want to provide the opportunity for students that maybe they're not thinking about this on a daily basis. How can they participate? What are the opportunities? We issued a sustainability culture survey this past spring. It was the first one that we ever put out into our Temple community. And what we found, which is not surprising to me, but most people are willing to do the sustainable thing if it is easy, convenient, and they know about it, right? So we have to meet people where they're at. We have to provide those opportunities for them to do things like stay local during their study abroad experience. And then you then have the opportunity to say, okay, like, here's why this is important for a variety of different reasons, but making that tie to the environment, to sustainability, to culture.
Well, thank you for sharing those examples. You two are just doing such cool work. It's really cool to hear. So Rebecca, back to you. What would you say to someone at a smaller institution that maybe doesn't have a dedicated sustainability office? What should they do? Where should they start?
So the first thing that I would say is look to your local municipality, because a lot of the times there is a person within your local government that is tasked with looking at sustainability. Maybe it's someone who's just tasked with looking at recycling, right? But that's a great place to start. All individuals, I think, working at this in this field, we're looking for people that are interested in participating, right? It's really hard to identify an opportunity and have to convince someone to work with us. So if you reached out to your local municipality's sustainability person and were like, hey, we're interested in supporting you and doing more, learning how we can partner, I guarantee they're going to be excited. So I would say that's the first thing that you should do. You should just look around, do some research to say, okay, are there people within your local government that are the experts. If, you know, in addition to that, I think like reach out to your peers, right? Because when you are part of a smaller institution, maybe you don't have as many resources as, you know, at Temple University, but I am sure, I'm confident that if somebody reached out to Suzanne and was like, hey, like, how do I do this? This is interesting. Walk me through it. Suzanne would be like, for sure. And I guarantee if Suzanne reached out to me and was like, hey, can you join this call? Like, give them some input or feedback, like, sign me up.
I love, you've given such a nice segue there, and I really would like to comment on partnerships. I say this a lot, UN SDG 17, Sustainable Development Goal 17 partnerships has been so critical to our progress. And so I want to mention Sarah Short-Hutira, who is our institutional relations manager and has been a part of our sustainability committee since the beginning. She was reaching out to some of our colleagues at the University of Virginia, Middlebury, some of these other institutions that have been you know, making such great headway on this front, our partners at Penn State, and fostering these relationships to reach out and say, hey, how are you approaching this? What challenges are you facing with offsets and things like this? And that has been really critical to our overall partnership. And moving forward with our progress. So I definitely would encourage anyone to reach out to partners outside of your institution for advice. We're all working on this together, right? And it's going to take all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that it sounds like you two have also become good friends throughout this process.
I would say so. Rebecca is one of my favorite people in the world.
Well, I love that a beautiful friendship can come out of this work as well. It's not just the work. So what is a resource that you would recommend our listeners either follow or go take a look at after they listen to this episode?
I would start with CANIE. CANIE has some great resources on the website. The Forum on Education Abroad and NAFSA both have sustainability resources and working groups if folks are interested in joining. We could share our website, the Global Green website, and Rebecca's Office of Sustainability website. We have some carbon calculators and things like that on there. And we can probably drop those into the podcast description for folks later on.
Definitely. We'll add it to the show notes.
Yeah, the STARS website that Rebecca mentioned too. Rebecca, what resources beyond that would you suggest?
Yeah, so I would definitely encourage folks to sign up for like ASHE's newsletters. So they have a couple of different like opportunities. So they do, you know, free education or low cost education about issues of climate and sustainability in higher education. Second Nature is like great. They have a policy newsletter that's really, I think, like user friendly. It's just a bit of information that you can kind of see what's happening, you know, in your state or your city federally, that maybe you can leverage opportunities based on like policy and legislation that's coming down the pike. And then again, like Suzanne mentioned it, I think it's really important if you're starting out a program and you're looking for a framework, having something that's like very approachable, general, but will also keep you on track. I would look at the UN's sustainability development goals. Like you can really pick and choose kind of what makes sense for you and then just run with it.
I've been typing furiously. I thank you for those recommendations. I'm going to link to all of those in our show notes for sure. Any last words of wisdom or advice that you want to share with our listeners?
I want to tap into the UN Sustainable Development Goals point that Rebecca just made. And, you know, when you look at those goals overall, you know, we've been very focused on climate action, SDG 13, but our goals in education abroad and working toward a more holistic solution for the future. When you look at all of the SDGs, there are so many different ways that you can approach this, or social justice and equality and, all of these really important issues that we are working for and towards. It's all intertwined. So that's a great resource. I'm so glad you mentioned it.
Yeah. And I would just say, like, we're all learning. So just dive in.
Oh, short and sweet. I love it. Thank you.
Start small.
Yeah.
Start anywhere.
Yeah. Reach out, ask those questions. I love all of the advice. You two are such a joy to speak with and such an inspiration, I think, to our fields in general. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today and for sharing all of your knowledge and experience with our listeners, who I think will get a lot out of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the CANIE Climate Dialogues. If you want to get involved with Travel with CANIE, check out the LinkedIn group, Travel with CANIE, all capital letters, where people traveling sustainably are sharing their itineraries and connecting with colleagues also making the choice to lower their travel emissions. You can find a link to the group in the show notes. 2 quick, easy climate actions you can take today are to subscribe to and rate our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Feel free to leave a comment and let us know what you think. We'd also like to remind our listeners that CANIE is a volunteer-run and led organization. If you have felt inspired by this episode today, please consider heading to our website, canie.org, and making a donation to help our operations and growth.